They say you can get used to any kind of silence, even the kind that feels like it's listening. Back in March of 1922, that silence lived and breathed on the Hinterkaifeck farm. It clung to the corners of the house like cobwebs, sat heavy on our shoulders when we tried to sleep. I remember how the walls creaked even when the wind was still. I'd tell myself it was just the old beams settling. But then, the footsteps started. Soft, dragging, overhead. And there was no one in the attic. I wasn't family, not exactly. My name isn't important. I was a distant cousin, or perhaps just a trusted friend. Someone who came and went, who helped when help was needed. That winter, I'd stayed on and off at the Gruber farm. Andreas trusted me enough to let me sleep in the parlor, near the kitchen stove. That room had the only warmth during those bitter March nights. The old maid, Crescens, had left 6 months before. Quit suddenly, packed in a fit of tears, shaking like she'd seen the devil himself. "It lives above us," she whispered before she left. "It watches." No one really believed her, except maybe little Kazelia. That girl. She always seemed to know things before she could explain them. But the rest of us, we scoffed. Andreas, proud and stubborn, waved her off like she was just a frail thing with a weak mind. But I remember how pale he looked those nights. How he'd double-lock the doors and keep a lantern burning even after midnight. The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the frost had settled deep into the earth, making everything brittle and quiet. That night, I'll never forget it. There was a storm brewing in the distance, thunder rolling like distant drums. The rafters groaned with the weight of wind and time. I was lying awake by the stove, staring into the embers, listening. It began the way it always did, a faint creaking, like someone shifting their weight above me. Only this time it was different. The sounds were closer, more purposeful. Steps, not rats, not timber, but heavy human footsteps. One, pause, another, slower. I held my breath. Up in the attic, something breathed. Not the wind. Not some trick of the air slipping through gaps in the roof tiles. No, this was breath. Wet, low, steady. Like something crouched just above the ceiling, knowing I was below, listening just like I was. I wanted to call out, to wake Andreas, but some primal instinct pinned me down, told me not to move. That whatever it was, it wanted to be known. It wanted me to speak first. I didn't. Morning came with no answers. Just pale sun through thin curtains, and Andreas muttering over a missing house key. Victoria was pale that day too, her eyes red-rimmed. She said Chazelia had woken up screaming again, saying the ceiling man whispered her name. Andreas grunted when I told him what I'd heard. "There's no man," he snapped. "Just mice. Imagination. That maid filled your head with nonsense." But later, when he thought no one saw, I watched him take the ladder to the attic and stay there for almost an hour. When he came down, he said nothing. But he looked like a man who'd seen footprints in a locked room. That was the last night I slept near the stove. Because I knew now, whatever lived in that attic wasn't just watching. It was waiting. It snowed the night before. Not a flurry, not a dusting, but a thick, heavy snowfall that blanketed the farm and smothered sound like a pillow over the mouth. The kind of silence that makes you feel like the world has gone still for good. I remember stepping outside early that morning, boots crunching through the icy crust, my breath fogging in the frigid air. The animals were uneasy, shuffling in their pens with a kind of nervous energy, but it wasn't until I passed by the edge of the barn that I saw them. Footprints, not mine, not Andreas's, not anyone from the family. A single trail. Deep, deliberate steps, pressed into the snow in a straight line, emerging from the woods. They led toward the engine room, then simply stopped. No return path, no diverging tracks. Just vanished. I crouched down and studied them. The snow was too clean to lie. Someone had walked out of the trees and up to the side of the house, but they hadn't walked back. I felt something prickling at the back of my neck. I called out for Andreas. He came grumbling, half-dressed and rubbing sleep from his eyes. But when he saw the tracks, the color drained from his face. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared, then motioned for me to follow him. We went to the engine room. Everything looked untouched, nothing obviously stolen or out of place. But there was a strange smell in the air, faint, metallic, like rust and cold sweat. And there was something else. On the bench, tucked neatly beneath a coil of rope, was a folded newspaper. One that Andreas didn't subscribe to. One that nobody in town received. I remember the way he touched it, like it might explode. "This wasn't here yesterday," he said, his voice flat, brittle. We didn't talk much after that. Not about the footprints, not about the paper. We didn't tell Victoria, didn't want to alarm the children. But that silence hung heavier than ever. Every door creak felt longer. Every gust of wind outside felt like breath against glass. Later that day, as we brought in firewood, little Kazelia tugged at my coat sleeve. Her face was pale, eyes wide. She pointed toward the tree line. "He's there," she whispered. I followed her finger. Just trees. Nothing moved. "Who's there?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, almost inaudibly, she said, "The man who lives on the ceiling." The chill in the air had nothing on the one that passed through my chest. Inside the house, Victoria told her off gently, brushed her hair aside and kissed her head, said it was just a dream. But I caught her glancing at the ceiling later, like she was listening too. That night, no one spoke of the footprints, not even Andreas. But he double-bolted every door and sat awake by the kitchen table until the fire went out. He kept checking over his shoulder, kept fiddling with the lantern. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Because even through the thick walls and shuttered windows, I could still feel it, the forest watching us. Like the trees had eyes, and somewhere out there, a trail of footprints waited in the snow, leading in, but never out. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, just as the sky turned the color of wet ash. Maria Baumgartner, young, quiet, and nervous, clutched her small suitcase like a shield as Andreas introduced her to the house. I remember how she paused at the gate, staring up at the windows before crossing the threshold. Something about the air must have felt wrong to her. It always did. But for newcomers, it hit harder. A heaviness. A stillness too complete. Andreas showed her around, introduced her to Victoria and the children, and said she'd be staying in the small room by the pantry. She nodded, tried to smile, and went straight to unpack. But I saw the way she kept glancing upward, toward the ceiling, as if she could hear something already. I didn't blame her. The house was breathing again that day. Doors creaked open without a draft. The floorboards groaned in places no one was standing. A small hammer fell from its hook in the shed without warning. Kazelia, little Kazelia, asked Maria if she could hear the man whispering under the roof. Maria froze. Victoria quickly shushed her and sent her outside to play. But the girl just stood at the window instead, watching the trees, watching for movement. Maria didn't say much at dinner, just pushed her food around her plate and kept glancing toward the kitchen door, as though half expecting it to swing open by itself. And later, when she went to bed, she left the lamp burning low beside her. I could see the faint glow from under her door all night. I was sleeping near the front room again, not far from the main hallway. The fire had burned low. My breath came out in little clouds. Then I heard it. Thud. A low, wet sound. Distant, but unmistakable. I sat up. Then came the animals. The pigs in the pen started grunting wildly. The cows kicked their stalls. The chickens clucked in frenzied confusion. I heard their wings battering against the wooden walls of the coop like they were trying to escape. Something had startled them. Something had moved through them. I looked to the window, saw nothing but the pale wash of moonlight. Then I heard the front door creak, very slowly, and a cold gust swept through the hall. I crept to the doorframe, heart pounding, feet like stones. I didn't dare speak, didn't call for Andreas. I just listened. The door slammed shut again, hard. and something heavy padded across the porch. I pressed myself back, barely breathing. For a moment, everything went still again. The kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. Then, from upstairs, Maria screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. Just a sharp, breathless yelp. Then silence. By the time I raced up the stairs, she was standing at her door, pale as flour, trembling. She said nothing. Just pointed to the ceiling above her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Something had been up there, and it had let her know. Later, Andreas claimed the wind had knocked a beam loose. Victoria didn't argue, but she didn't look convinced. No one spoke about the thud, or the scream, or the way the animals still refused to calm down. But as I lay back down that night, sleepless and cold, I realized something had changed. The house wasn't just haunted by noises or shadows anymore. The house had someone new in it, and they weren't hiding anymore. It started with the wind, or at least that's what I told myself. A howling gale had been rising since dusk, tossing the bare branches like bony fingers against the windows. But this wind carried something with it, a sound, distant yet deliberate. It didn't belong to the storm. A clanging, metallic and rhythmic, like a loose hinge swinging on rusted nails. It was coming from the barn. Andreas was the first to hear it. He paused mid-step on his way to stoke the fire and tilted his head like an animal catching the scent of a predator. "Did you hear that?" he asked no one in particular. I did. We all did. Even Maria, clutching little Josef in her arms, stiffened as the barn doors groaned again. Andreas grabbed his coat. Victoria told him not to go out in the cold, that it could wait till morning, but he was already halfway to the door. He muttered something about those damn animals and slammed it shut behind him. That was the last time I saw him alive. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. Then came the second sound, a muffled thump. Not quite like a fall, more like impact. The kind of sound you feel in your stomach. Victoria stood, worry on her face, but she didn't say a word. She took her scarf, wrapped it around her neck, and told young Cecilia to stay inside. "Watch Joseph," she said, voice tight. Then she left too. She never came back. The girl, 7 years old, bright as fire, waited all of 5 minutes before bolting to the door. "Mama," she called. She turned to look at me, eyes wide, not with fear, but confusion. "Why don't they answer?" I couldn't bring myself to stop her. She slipped out, barefoot, into the dark. I followed. I don't know why. Something in me, maybe guilt, maybe duty, told me not to let her go alone. But the second I stepped out into the yard, the wind died. Just stopped, like someone sucked the breath out of the world. The air hung still, dense, heavy. A deathly quiet covered the farm like a blanket too thick to breathe through. The barn doors were ajar, swaying just slightly, though no wind moved them now. Then, movement. To the right, beyond the barn, a shadow, quick and slinking. I froze. I wasn't imagining it. Something, someone, was there. From inside the barn came a wet, dragging noise. Then, a scream. But it wasn't from inside. It came from behind me, inside the house. I ran, back through the yard, back into the hallway, heart slamming in my chest. The house was too quiet, not peaceful, not still, just wrong. I called for Maria. No answer. Then came the sound that still wakes me in the middle of the night. Footsteps. Not mine. Not anyone I knew. Slow. Deliberate. Inside the house. I turned, every hair on my body standing straight. The steps came from the back room, past the pantry, toward the cradle. I didn't go toward them. I went the other way. I shut myself in the parlor, bolted the door, pulled a table in front of it, and collapsed to the floor. The fire had nearly gone out, casting just enough glow to show my breath in the air. I held my breath and listened. The steps stopped, then turned, and came closer. Across the hall, past the threshold, just outside the door. Then, nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours, maybe days. The silence grew so loud it became a sound in itself. I prayed the footsteps wouldn't start again. But the truth? I was more afraid that they would stop. Because if they stopped, it meant the thing walking had finally found what it was looking for. And it was no longer searching. It was watching. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember removing the table I had barricaded against it. All I know is that I was outside again, moving through the cold, gray stillness like a sleepwalker. The barn loomed ahead, its doors still slightly open, just as they had been hours before. Something inside me whispered not to go closer, but my feet kept moving. There was no sound, not from the wind, not from the animals, not from the house behind me. Even my footsteps seemed muffled. I stepped over the threshold into the barn, expecting the usual smells of hay and livestock. Instead, I was met with something heavier, thick, metallic, blood. The light through the slats above was faint, but enough to see the dark streaks on the floor. I followed them, slowly, trembling, heart pounding like a drum in my ears, until I saw the pile. Bodies. 4 of them. Stacked like discarded rags beneath a thin scattering of hay, as if someone had made the effort to cover them but not enough to hide what they had done. I could make out Andreas's boots, Victoria's dress, the old woman's silver hair. And in the center, twisted in a way no child should ever be, was little Kazelia. I didn't scream. I didn't move. My knees gave out beneath me, and I dropped beside the pile, unable to process what I was seeing. There was so much blood. It had soaked into the straw, into the soil, into the wood itself. A silence pressed in around me, dense and endless. But something broke through it. A soft cry. Not a human voice. It was the animals, the cows in their stalls, still alive, still breathing, as if nothing had happened. One turned to look at me, eyes wide and silent, as though it had been watching the whole thing, forced to witness what none of us could have imagined. Then I remembered. Joseph. I stumbled out of the barn, numb and barely breathing. I crossed the yard without looking behind me, without even daring to listen for footsteps. I don't know how I opened the door. It felt like the house itself didn't want me back inside. But I pushed forward, because I had to. The air inside was colder now. Dead. I moved down the hallway on hands and knees, heart crashing in my chest. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, but the house made no other sound. No voice, no movement, just me, crawling toward the nursery. The door was ajar. The lantern on the wall still burned faintly. I reached the threshold. He was there. Joseph lay in his cradle, still, unmoving. A white sheet had been pulled over him, too neat, too careful, and across the fabric, a long, dark smear. Blood. I reached out, hands shaking, but I couldn't bring myself to lift the sheet. I didn't need to. I already knew. The silence told me everything. Then, something creaked upstairs. It was faint, but not distant. Not like before. Footsteps. In the attic. And this time I knew. He hadn't left. He was still here. I backed into the hallway, stumbling over myself, every breath a struggle. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I only knew one thing. I couldn't make a sound. Because now I understood. This wasn't over. Not yet. He had lured them out. One by one. And now, he was waiting for me. I don't remember how I found the crawl space. It might have been instinct, or desperation, or some ancient part of my brain that remembered how to survive when hunted. After I backed away from Joseph's cradle, after the sound in the attic shifted to the stairs, I knew I had no more time to think. I fled, not out of the house, not toward the barn, but down, into the pantry, behind the loose boards where old flour sacks used to be stored. I squeezed myself into the gap between the walls, the space barely wide enough to breathe. A place meant for rodents, not men. But it was the only place the house didn't creak when you moved. I heard him. He moved through the house like he belonged there. Heavy, slow footsteps. Not rushed, not frantic. He wasn't searching. He already knew no one was left to find. Except me. I don't know if he knew I was there, hidden beneath the floor. I don't know if he could hear my heartbeat or see the faint puff of breath that slipped through the slats. But I know this. He stayed. For 3 nights. And he lived there. He cooked. I could hear him strike the flint and blow the fire to life in the kitchen stove. He moved pans, opened the pantry. Once I heard him humming, softly, a lullaby I didn't recognize, low and off-key. A cradle song, for no one. He fed the animals. I could hear the soft thud of hooves as he walked among them. The cows were calm. The chickens clucked softly. He knew how to move among them, how to make them believe everything was fine. He played the role of farmer with a butcher's calm precision. But the house felt different. It pulsed, heavy with rot and blood and silence. The kind of silence that stretches between screams. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even cry. I just lay in the dark, listening. Sometimes I drifted into something like sleep, haunted by images of Victoria's open mouth, Andreas's blood-soaked face, little Tazelia's torn hands. When I woke, the smell of cooked meat or boiling broth would fill the air, and I'd remember it wasn't a dream. Once, on the second night, I thought I'd go mad. He sang again, louder this time, rocking something back and forth on the wood floor above me. I could hear the slow creak of weight shifting. A cradle? But Joseph was gone. Was he pretending? Rehearsing some domestic scene in his head? Like a play? Was he playing house with the dead? I pressed both hands over my ears and bit down on my own tongue to keep from screaming. The third night, something changed. He stopped singing. Instead, I heard something being dragged. Not quickly, slowly, methodically, heavy. He was moving something. Maybe one of the bodies, maybe all of them. I didn't dare imagine what for. But I heard the barn door open. I heard the dull thunk of a shovel striking earth. I couldn't tell if he was burying them or digging something up. I thought about running, but I knew the forest was too far, the snow too bright. I would leave prints, just like the ones that led in. No prints ever led back out. So I stayed, and I waited. On the 4th morning, I heard the rooster crow. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I heard another human voice. Then, a knock. Loud, firm. Several voices calling out. Neighbors. I moved like a corpse rising from the dirt, crawled from the crawl space. Every joint screamed. My stomach twisted from hunger. I pulled the door open with what strength I had left and collapsed. I don't remember what I said. I don't know if they even understood me. I remember hands grabbing me, lifting me out into the sunlight. The air stung my lungs. I remember someone shouting, someone running toward the barn, then chaos, screams, vomit, men turning pale and staggering back. Lawrence Schlittenbauer was there. I remember how his eyes scanned the yard like he was seeing it for the first time. But when he entered the house, he moved too naturally. He reached for the kettle on the stove without thinking. He touched the doorframe like he remembered the grain of the wood. He said he was just being thorough, helping the police, making sure everything was accounted for. But I knew better. I knew the way he looked up at the ceiling, like he expected someone to still be there. He wasn't afraid. He belonged. And me? I didn't speak another word for days, because I didn't know if the killer had left, or if he was still right there, wearing a neighbor's face. I remember the sound of boots. Not heavy like his, not deliberate like the ones I'd come to fear. These were rushed, clumsy, normal, human. I heard voices calling names: Andreas, Victoria, Maria. I couldn't respond at first. My mouth was dry, lips cracked. My voice had sunk somewhere deep inside me, buried under days of silence and fear. I crawled out from the pantry like a ghost dragged from the earth. The morning sun was bright, blinding. My eyes burned. I stumbled through the threshold of the house and collapsed onto the frozen soil. Someone gasped. Someone shouted. I felt arms around me, lifting me up, brushing the dirt and blood from my face. I tried to speak. I think I did. I told them not to go into the barn, not to go upstairs. But they didn't listen. Who would believe a half-starved, shaking wretch whose eyes refused to focus? Lorenz Schlittenbauer was among them. I recognized him instantly. He was the one who had led them in. He stood a little too still when they found the bodies. He didn't flinch when the sheet was lifted off Josef. He didn't gag when Victoria's hair, matted with blood, fell across her face like a curtain. No. He walked the rooms like a man returning to something familiar. Touched the kitchen table, glanced up at the attic door, opened drawers not to inspect, but to check. His eyes weren't wide with horror. They were narrow, remembering. I didn't say his name. I should have. I should have screamed it, should have told them everything. But what proof did I have? My own mind was fractured. I hadn't eaten in days. I couldn't even tell what was real anymore. But I saw the way he moved through that house. Like he knew which floorboards squeaked. Like he expected to see that newspaper folded just so in the corner. Like he already knew where the bodies were before the barn doors opened. They say he broke the news to the rest of the town. Said he found them. Said it looked like a robbery gone wrong. But the money was still in the house. The jewelry, untouched. The valuables, left to collect dust. No forced entry, no broken locks. Just a stolen key. A shadow through the attic. A murderer who fed the cows before slipping away. The investigation came. Then the police. They took statements. Measured footprints. Took the family's skulls away for analysis. They found the mattock, hidden away like a cursed artifact. But it told them nothing. And when they finally left, they left with no names. No arrests. No justice. In 1923, they tore the place down. They said it was a mercy. That no one wanted to live on haunted ground. The barn fell first, then the house, the roof, the walls, until only a blackened patch of soil remained. But I stayed away. I didn't go back. Not for years. Not until the dream started. Not until I heard the lullaby again. Sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear the barn door creak. I wake gasping, drenched in sweat, swearing I hear his boots on the stairs. I moved far away, changed my name, started again. But it didn't matter. Hinterkaifeck never left me. A decade later, I did return. Once. The place was gone, swallowed by earth and trees. But I stood where the house once stood. Where I had crawled, where I had hidden, where he had walked above me, singing lullabies to the dead. And I swear to God. As I stood there, the wind stopped. The trees fell silent. And I heard a single breath. Right behind me. I turned. No one. But I knew. He was still there. And he was still watching.